That's like a future.
It was in this size. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Welcome, welcome. Who are all these people? Welcome to the launch of this unlikely, fantastic, beautiful success story called Body and Soul. And albeit a third, pardon my 19th century speech, but albeit practically half of the authors are here tonight, we really are here for you. So this is really your night. And we want this to be a night when you feel like you have enjoyment, you have curiosity, and you have permission to take whatever you need to take from these kinds of stories. And it may be that you're a person who wants to write something like this, or you know people that you need to listen to who have these kinds of stories to tell. My name is Susan Scott. I'm the instigator behind this. If you read my piece, thank you. Thank you. My piece in the book is called Zion's Children, and the word instigator is very important in that story. So it seemed like a good time to reclaim that name tonight, reclaim that title. We're going to open with a land acknowledgement, and then I want to do some thank yous, and then we're going to go kind of quickly, kind of girl band style, like 5 and 4 at a time, and have very short readings, just so you get a taste of the voices and the perspectives. I'll say a little bit more about it, and then we'll have a chance just to mingle and get to know one another. Thank you. Okay, so Sandy, come on.
My name is Sandy Wabagijic, and I'm Odawa from Manitoulin Island. And I just arrived here from driving all day from there. There was like a lot of rain all the way and everything, and I thought, oh no. It was supposed to hail and everything, but thank God it didn't. So thank you very much. This is an honor to do this. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Miigwech.
And I'm going to turn this off, which is what all of you are going to do with your headphones. Thank you. Or power down, or whatever works for you. Okay, I want to say a few thank yous first. Where is Rosemary? Rosemary Joyle. Rosemary runs this kick-ass little theater, this fantastic place. Thank you for this. This is really.
We needed our air conditioning on.
Exactly. Anyway, thank you for letting us transform the space like this. This is the perfect place to be able to do this. So I want to thank all of you for coming, and I want to thank the authors for schlepping in. So Manitoulin, Kingston, Montreal, Barrie, Cambridge, Guelph, Waterloo. Yeah, just a and a few few Toronto people as well. But it's really fantastic to have everybody. Such a fantastic showing. So I want to say a couple of words about the book. This was a project that looked like it might go nowhere. It just seemed like a kind of crazy idea. It came out of a panel at the 2015 Wild Writers in Waterloo, Ontario. Christine Poutney, whom you will hear tonight, was on that panel. And as was Katie Miller, who's in the book but couldn't be here tonight, and also Eve Joseph, who's just been nominated for the Griffin Prize, any poetry people in the room. And it was a conversation that we wanted to have about spiritual memoir, and why is this so hard for people to talk about spiritual memoir, and what is it anyway, and is anybody doing it? And it was interesting because it was kind of a standing room only session, which really surprised us. It surprised me. And afterwards, a couple of people, who's also an instigator. She's, you'll hear Heidi tonight. And Emily McKibben, who's also here. People started to come and say, I have a piece I think might work. And I'm a nonfiction editor with the New Quarterly. I work with Pamela Malloy. And Pamela said, I think we probably need to start a series. So we started a series in the magazine called Soundings. and that kind of a nice innocuous title, like, you know, a spiritual memoir with a literary bent, or a literary memoir with a spiritual bent, you know, nothing too scary, you know, just something to kind of make it invitational to start. But I remember standing up at that panel and saying, you know, we need an imprint. We need something, in other words, we need a whole line of books dedicated to this kind of work, because, I'll tell you why. In my role as a teacher and editor for years and years and years, and I am hardwired for these kinds of stories. I think it's in my DNA. I listen for these stories. People send me incredible life story work all the time. What I've noticed over the years is they'll write really powerful things about trauma and sexuality and intimacy and incredible kinds of things, and then they'll write stuff about their inner lives, and it could be really ordinary something, or it could be powerful traditions that they're trying to reclaim, or a lot of baggage that they're trying to slough off. But in the long run, they'll often take a big pair of shears and cut that part out and take it out. And I'll say, why did you cut that out? And it's really interesting, the responses that come. There's a lot of shame around sharing those kinds of stories, partly because of the response. I'll say, why did you cut it out? Because nobody wants to hear this. Why did you cut this out? Because people actually call that the woo-woo part, and it makes them pretty uncomfortable. Why did you cut this out? Because I don't really understand it. It's part of my life, but I don't know where it fits. Why did you cut this out? Because I don't really feel like I have a language for this. I'm not sure what this is. So I'm hearing this over and over again. And what I finally decided was, what if we take all the big parts that are cut out with the big shears, and we put that at the center? And we say, what do we have when we have these kinds of stories? What are these stories? What do they tell us about who we are? As Canadians, we're kind of inherently polite, and we don't really like to rock the boat, and we kind of, you know, the politics, religion stuff kind of makes us a little uncomfortable. So maybe we haven't really developed those muscles to the same extent. And I think in a way we've kind of outsourced our inner life. We read a lot of this stuff from elsewhere, but we're not maybe so practiced at learning how to put our words around it. What I see with Indigenous writers is they are really leading the way with some incredible, very integrated, very holistic, very real, authentic stories. I think the rest of us, with the settler crowd, we need to get with the program. So this project grew out of that kind of instinct of mine to kind of take everything that's hidden and completely removed and put it at the center. And I wanted to work with storytellers and people who have a facility with language and who can just recreate a world and allow you to slip into that world. So with no judgment, right? Nobody's trying to convert you. Nobody's trying to argue anything. There's no preaching. It's just beautiful storytelling. And you can slip into that world and you can decide what that does for you. So that's where this book came from, 28 authors later. Also, women. Did anybody notice? It's all women. Also, women's stories tend to be taken big shear, cut out, put off to the side. So let's take those and put them right in the center. So thank you for coming for this. This is an incredible vote of confidence. It's really helpful to us to see this kind of interest and affirmation. Thank you. Give yourselves a big hand. Thank you. Also, I still think we need an imprint. So, yes, if anybody knows anybody, can talk to any publishers or anybody, I think, yeah, we're on a roll. We can do something here. So what I'm going to do is call people up. I think we'll start with 5, and we're going to go in alphabetical order, the same as in the book. So it's not kind of thematically grouped. There's no big pointers saying, read this, because this is the content. It's just alphabetical. And I'm going to call them up, and then I'll do the introductions. And then I'll do all the introductions at once, and then you just hear snippets of the stories. And there's one of my authors now, Christine. Come on in. That's okay. You're in the next group, so you're good. You're okay. Okay, so Jagtar, Carolina, and Euphemia, if you will come up.
Do you want us to sit?
Yeah, come up here. Good. I'll introduce you, and then you can, and then after the introductions, just come up in alphabetical order. Okay. Jagtar Carr Otwell traveled halfway around the world before settling in Cambridge, Ontario, go figure, where she's working on a collection of personal essays. She won't share the title. She says it's fantastic, and she won't tell us what it is. You can find her award-winning work in the New Quarterly, Room, Prairie Fire, and other Canada publications. Carolina Echeverria is the cover artist for this book. She is a visual artist, a CBC commentator, I threw that in there, the founder of Native Immigrant Arts Collective and the owner of Metech Gallery and Hub in Montreal. The title of her unsettling memoir in progress is Native Immigrant, A Personal Journey into Our Home and Native Land. Welcome. And Euphemia Fantetti is the editor of the Humber Literary Review, the other literary magazine I love the most, next to the New Quarterly, Sister Mags, and the author of A Recipe for Disaster and Other Unlikely Tales of Love. Her next book, My Father, Fortune Tellers, and Me, a Memoir, will be released by Mother Tongue Publishing this fall. Excellent. Okay. Ready?
No. Kind of wish my name didn't start with A now. So forgive me if I stumble over words. I've been drinking. No, seriously, I have. Hello, can you hear me? Oh yeah, you can hear me now.
Is that okay? Can you hold?
Yep. Okay. Perfect.
Still
Thank
bossy, still the editor.
Yeah. Okay. Unfinished journey. I was born a Sikh at the local hospital in Derby, England. I was that girl who hated going to the Gurdwara. Once a month I'd tell Mum I was on my period, even if it didn't fall on a Sunday. And I'd get to stay at home. When I had to go, I'd sit on the patterned rugs surrounded by strangers, watching the priest with his long white beard and yellow turban reading from the holy book and pretending I understood what he was reading. I sat cross-legged behind Mum so she couldn't see me, with my elbow resting on my knee and hand cradling my head as my finger followed the curly red and gold patterns on the rug. I'd bite my lip or pinch my thigh to stop myself from crying for being forced to do one more thing I didn't want to do. During the morning assembly at school, I was introduced to another kind of religion. My classmates and I would shuffle through the double doors into the grey theatre, where two teachers standing at the doors handed out plain white booklets before we quietly took our seats. The headmistress would ask us to stand and turn to the Lord's Prayer. The rustling of crisp white pages echoed around the room as we followed her lead and began to recite the prayer in unison. Our morning sessions ended with singing Kumbaya and Morning Has Broken. I visited many Christian churches, not to find God, but because of my love for old buildings and the history that lingered in the bricks. I'd close my eyes and lay my hand on the cold stones and try to go back hundreds of years and imagine labourers laying the stones. The older I got, the less I attended Sikh services. In the last 12 years, I've been to the Gurdwara twice. Once for my dad's funeral in Derby, and the other time on Christmas Eve when I travelled to India with Mum and visited the Golden Temple in Punjab. Thank you.
E.
Oh,
Yes.
it's A, but in Canada it's E.
It's
Sorry. Okay. So, I gave this land 3 children. I came to Montreal thinking it was Canada. Turns out it was in Quebec. Vive le Québec libre. The lost children of Peter Pan, immigrant children forgotten. You don't give up your suffering so easily after that. I learned that Quebec is Mohawk land, the land of Adirondack. Adirondack told me that the Mohawk language has over 300 million words. How many words are in the English language? Around 1.5 million. You cannot comprehend what you cannot name. I drove my children from Montreal to Halifax so they would know their land, this land. You cannot love the land you do not know. There was nothing between Edmundston and Halifax, just a long, straight road. All we could see was road, road, road. I visited Chile in 2015 and traveled south, deep into Mapuche territory. Others from Canada come with me. A sheep is slain in honor of our arrival. I swallow and smile after having quietly washed in the blood that watered my homecoming. Blood stains my hands, splashes on my shoes before seeping into the ground. A bloody welcome, a bloody massacre, for me a turning point. In the night, I hold Susan's hand out in the land as we swing in our new ponchos and greet the Huetripantu, feeding the earth, drumming and dancing, our hands joining friends from Temuco to Ontario. I take Adreniadagon to my place up in the mountains to Les Laurentides. He says he did not know that name, but he knows the little towns and places and communities in the small hour between Montreal and Saint Lucie. He shows me strawberry fields in my own mountain yard. Strawberries are the first fruit to bloom in spring. Mohawks don't have hell or heaven. They have strawberry fields forever. Adreniadagon told me never to feel alone, even after Mamie died and people back home forgot my name. He told me I had Grandmother Moon and the birds and the wind. He cleared my voice with the purest water so I could speak again. He cleared the dust out of my ears so I could hear birdsong again. He wiped my tears with the softest hide so I could see clearly once more. He combed my hair with the finest comb and wiped the stain of pain off my chest with the same soft hide he used to wipe my tears.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Susan, so much for this opportunity. I'm reading from Repent, Sinner. My religious past is a typical girl meets church, girl loses church, girl spends the rest of her life trying to figure out what the hell happened story. Introduced to Catholicism before I could form words, the relationship has been tense from the start. At my baptism, everyone had a marvelous time eating cannoli, drinking anisette, and smoking cigarettes in the same room as baby me. In photos, I have the floppy-headed gaze of a newborn taking in her surroundings, staring up at the people seated next to me with interest. I imagine my infant indignation and skepticism. Original sin? Who, me? Listen, I just got here and I'm not buying it. For at least 500 years, my family lived in a tiny hillside village called Bonefro in the region of Molise, a mountainous area in the middle of Italy, about 4 hours southeast of Rome. Everyone in Bonefro believed in the same God and followed the same faith. Belief was the fabric meant to hold children close to the clan. So I was trundled off to Mass every Christmas and Easter. I squirmed in uncomfortable tights and black patent leather Mary Janes, waiting for a miracle, a message, or a visitation. No such luck. My folks believe in the devil, destiny, and damnation. If my family had a motto, it would be Repent, Sinner. A battle cry, He died for our sins. A mantra, Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. A slogan, Stop pestering us, Satan. Thank you.
All right. Liz Harmer, Shanice, Tamara, Amanda. It's a bit like the Kiwanis Festival, you know. You call them up for their recital. This is so amazing. So beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Liz Harmer. Liz wrote The Amateurs, a speculative novel about a disastrous invention and the tragedy of time. Among other things, she's working on a memoir about madness and faith, as well as a Gothic novel of erotic obsession and ruin. Shanice Jan Mohammed is a poet, arts educator, and land artist who firmly believes in fostering community through collaboration, compassion, and creativity. She's the author of 2 collections of poetry, Bleeding Light and Fire Smoke, both from Mawenzi House, and is currently working on her 3rd collection of novels. Tamara Zhang is a Montreal-born, mixed-race writer of Chinese and European ancestry who lives in Guelph and is working on a collection of nonfiction stories. Watch for her work in Rice Paper, Room, The New Quarterly, Emerge 18, Invisiblog, Carte Blanche, LWE Blog. She is a graduate of the Writers' Studio and part of the Room Collective. And finally, Amanda Leduc lives in Hamilton, where she serves as the Communications and Development Coordinator for the Festival of Literary Diversity, the other most amazing festival on the planet, Canada's first festival for diverse authors and stories. She has cerebral palsy and is the author of Disfigured, on fairy tales, disability, and making space, out from Coach House Books in February 2020. Welcome.
Well, my essay is called My Flannery. I was raised by Dutch Calvinists who love Flannery O'Connor. And also I fell in love with an atheist who I married. So that's the background you need. 20-some years into believing, come what may, I finally discovered the beauty of the opposing position. In 2005, my young husband and I took a trip to New York City and went to a planetarium show, my first planetarium show. At the time, I believed my knowledge of science to be fairly strong. I had learned about the discoveries of DNA. Few of us had a problem with the idea that God created the world through a big bang. Evolution from monkeys was a larger stumbling block for my community. The planetarium show we saw concerned the question of life on other planets. We were surrounded by 10-year-olds on field trips. I was completely unprepared in the moments that followed for a sudden loss of faith. The show moved quickly through the basic physics of the universe's origin, and then boom. Harrison Ford gave this epigrammatic zinger as all around us cooled rock and ashes began to sprout trees. As soon as it was possible for there to be life, it was there. The revelation was immediate. We Christians did not have an exclusive claim on beauty or mystery. Humans without God were still capable of a range of human emotion, including awe and love and kindness. Shaken, I sat at the cafeteria afterwards looking at my fork. I'm more important to God than this fork, I told Adam woefully. Even if there is a God, the universe is so vast. I began to call myself an atheist, though Adam, who had spent most of his life with no particular relation to religious experience, laughed gently and said that I was far from an atheist. I would find myself thinking that God had predestined this phase of disbelief toward some end. I was so unable to shake the sense that I was important to him. I tried and failed to picture the sky as if it were not filled with watchfulness and care. Around that time, I was sitting in a movie theater when I had a sudden oceanic feeling of fellowship with all the other people in that theater, all of them strangers. I realized that I had always felt set apart, pit against, and that really, everywhere, there was just other people. Now I say, perplexed, that the less devout I've become, the more loving I am. I would question your use of the word devout then, my father said, but I really was devout back then, in a daily and continuous conversation with God, immersed in scriptures, thinking always of Christ, certain, doctrinaire, judgmental, unkind. The farther I get from God, the more vulnerable I feel. And this vulnerability, like the loss of a wooden leg in an O'Connor story, is what makes love for others possible. I think I'll end there. Thank you.
My essay is called Embracing Impermanence. What does it mean to encounter the world with a broken heart? What does it mean to be born with a hole in the most vital part of yourself? A place you will speak from, create from, love from. A place of knowing. A place that will break itself and mend itself, the pulsating red joy that beats in spite of you. What does it mean for the heart to feel empty before having the chance to be whole? My mom recalls a time when I would draw my heart in the darkest crayon color I could find and demand an answer to the one question that plagued my little self. Why is my heart bad? She admitted to not having the answers, And so she gave me books about every religious and spiritual tradition she could think of. Stacked on my shelf were stories of Krishna and Siddhartha, meditations on nature and tales of Sufis. Reminders that the questions that riddled me were questions people have been asking for generations, millennia, eons. I have always known that my heart needed to be healed, even if I had no idea why it was broken in the first place. I was 9 months old when it came to light that I had a hole in my heart. The hole was repaired, but then the doctors noticed that my natural pacemaker wasn't working properly. My heart doubled in size, could barely be contained inside my tiny chest. So I was hooked up to an external pacemaker until my heart, could contract enough for an internal pacemaker to be inserted. My pacemakers have changed over the years, clunks of metal that inspire nicknames like Bionic Woman, to pieces the size of my fist. I often forget that I have a pacemaker, and when I remember, I'm humbled and disturbed to know that I owe my steady beat of vitality to the reliable pulse of a machine. Thanks to my heart, for the first 10 years of my life, the hospital was my second home, a home where childhood joy met untimely illness and sometimes death, a home where eating my favorite comfort foods and watching my favorite shows almost made me forget the panic of anesthesia or the prick of a needle. Visiting the hospital now as an adult can be humiliating, being poked and prodded while trying to keep your dignity intact. But as a child, I had no concept of dignity and control. I had yet to develop that self-cherishing part of myself. As a child, I had no choice but to surrender. When I was 15 or so, I faced another routine replacement surgery. Being a teen made me even less trusting, more unsure of my confidence and courage. The night before my surgery, I could not sleep. My imagination conjured up grotesque images of what could happen during my surgery, of all the things that could go wrong. Exhausted and unable to sleep. Exhausted and unable to shake those fears, I retreated to the living room and turned on the TV. There on my screen was a turbaned man dancing barefoot at a shrine somewhere in Pakistan, wearing a jewel-toned robe reminiscent of Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat. He played an ektara, a one-stringed instrument, and danced to the beat of bells draped on his ankles. He was singing the words of the famed humanist poet and Sufi saint, Bulleh Shah. The path of love is long and difficult, full of pain and punishments. Love has its roots in all realms of heaven and earth. Love is in every heart.
Yeah, short people problems. Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so just the context for me is I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and this is actually based loosely on a letter I actually wrote to Mary Carr. Kind of crazy about it, but are you there, God? It's me talking to Mary Carr. So this is in the middle of the letter. I know all this JW stuff sounds like a bunch of hooey, but I wouldn't be here now without Jehovah or the brothers and sisters in the congregation. Everyone viewed us kids as orphans. It didn't help that Ma did a stint in the mental ward of the hospital and wrote scary things in the Bible and on the floor of her room. Even though my home life was less than ideal, when you're living it, you're not wondering what's going to happen next. You're just trying to get through it, aren't you? It's only now that I have the courage to ask my brother and sister about their versions of truth. Even then, all it takes is for my sister to say, "Remember when Mummy was up all night making popovers and she never got up in the morning?" And I'm 14 again. Your honesty helped me understand Ma's alcoholic ways. I hated her because of the drink. Sure, she got sober through AA, and even though I sat through a baker's dozen of her speaker talks, I never really listened. I was in therapy before I listened, replayed her talk on tape cassette, if anyone can remember that. The L team meetings where I went, we were supposed to take turns talking about our problems.
but those took place in churches. And since I had been taught that the devil is the ruler of Christendom, I was creeped out just being in there. In Kingdom Halls, there are no icons, no robes, and there definitely was no Jesus hanging around on that cross, looking like he'd also like to be anywhere but staring down on us sorry sacks week in, week out. Jehovah made me feel safe and cared for in his congregation and with his commission to preach about his name and his kingdom. Being a part of the brothers and sisters worldwide who were committed gave me a job that would keep me busy for a lifetime. I felt that the Kingdom Hall things make sense to me. I could count on the regularity of Jehovah and his rules. If I stuck to Jehovah and his written word, I would be written into his book of remembrance. I was a real keener when it came to pleasing others, especially Jehovah. I'd do whatever it took to please him, believe you me.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you again to Susan. I know we're all going to thank her a million times before the end of the night, but thank you again for bringing us all here. My essay is called The Places in Between, and just to set it up, I was raised Catholic and was very devout, and then fell in love with a girl when I was 21, 22. For my 22nd birthday, Emily took me out for Chinese food. We ate pot stickers drenched in soy sauce. She was graceful with her chopsticks and I was a failure. She'd cut her hair and streaked it pink. Now and then our knees would touch beneath the table. Celibacy, she said. I just don't get it. I mean, how can you survive so long by only masturbating? I coughed. Actually, I've never done that either. She laughed so long and hard at this that the other patrons around us turned to smile. That's what's wrong with you, she said, finally. Jesus Christ, that's insane. She was newly in love then with a man named Paul. It shone so brightly on her that every time I was around her, I felt intoxicated and tiny. Her easy talk of sex and death and love made me feel stupid and sheltered, but also excited, like I'd been wrong about the world my whole life and was finally getting to learn. When I was 29, I went to Iona, the tiny Scottish island off the Isle of Mull. From Edinburgh, you take a train and then a ferry and then a bus and then another ferry to get there. The journey takes about 7 hours. St. Columba landed there in 563 BCE and built a monastery that was burned in later centuries. In the early 1900s, the church was rebuilt and the island reclaimed its status as a place of pilgrimage. George MacLeod, who founded the new spiritual community on the island, called it a thin place, an area where the veil between this world and the next was thin as tissue paper. I did not really believe in God anymore when I went to the island, but what I remember most from that visit is sitting in the abbey during a rainstorm, listening to the wind lash against the roof so hard I felt sure it would break. A tiny spot of calm in the middle of a hurricane, and I couldn't stop crying. When I left the island a day later, the feeling went away. I actually felt at retreat while I was on the ferry, watching the island recede, like waking from a dream about flying, only to discover that you're rooted firmly to the ground. Before I fell in love with Emily, I was in love with a man who we'll call Jim. He'd been my English teacher in high school, and the crush lasted from age 15 until about 27, give or take. It still flares up now and then. It was such a doomed crush, so wonderful and terrible in its implausibility, that sometimes I wonder if it used up all of my romantic energy, if parts of myself burned out too soon. Though of course that sounds silly now, on this other side of 30. Aren't we endless, after all? Isn't our capacity for hope and love the most infinite thing that we have? I don't ever remember loving God in this kind of headlong way, even though I wanted to so badly. When we met for Christian fellowship at school, I would sit and bow my head, pretend to pray, when really I was just repeating things that everyone else said and hoping deep down that one day they would take. Fake it till you make it. At the hospital where I work, the psychiatrists sometimes say this to their patients. Pretend to be happy and eventually you'll feel it. Pretend that you love God, I told myself over and over. Pretend that you believe it all of the time, not just in your dark moments, and one day it will all come true. Thank you.
How are you holding up? Okay, good. Welcome to those of you who come in. Have you found places to sit, stand? Yes? Are you okay? Okay. All right, next set. We are barreling through here. This is good. Christine McLeod, Emily McKibben, Christine Poutney, and Heidi Reimer. Let's do Heidi too. All set? Okay. Christine McLeod, and Christine is also an instigator. She was the one that had the conversation with me at that festival in 2015, said, we should maybe do a book, and then she friggin' bailed from it. So she did not co-edit this. Anyway, 3 years later, we managed to wrest her piece out of her. It's fantastic. You'll hear it tonight. Christine McLeod is a yoga teacher and writer based in Kingston. She's been inhabiting desert caves, mountain huts, cabins in the wood, arts colonies, and ashrams for her nonfiction book about the art of retreat in the modern world. Watch for On Retreat from ECW Press in 2020. Emily McKibben is a Barrie-based curator and award-winning writer. Her current project is shaggy, emotional, and a bit wild, thinking through getting older, stronger, and weirder in the visual arts. Christine Poutney, who has been putting most of her energy recently into building her therapy practice, haveallyourfeelings.com, is working on her spiritual memoir, Creature of Belief. And Heidi Reimer. Heidi Reimer's short stories and essays have appeared in Chatelaine, The New Quarterly, Little Fiction, and The M Word, Conversations About Motherhood. She is currently at work.
Thanks so much, Susan, and thanks for not really holding it against me. The thing about Susan is she's so enthusiastic. You have a conversation and say it would be a good idea to do X, and then she does it. She's a goddess on a mission. So my piece came about because somebody told me that they didn't think anger was spiritual. So anyway, mine's called Yoga Rage. I've got my wrong glasses on. I've been a student of yoga for 31 years and a teacher for 14. In case you think I'm about to make a case for my own enlightenment, I'll soon tell you how I came to swear at an 8-year-old. After 3 decades on a yoga mat, I'm oftentimes a raging yogi. It's not always the most peaceful people, after all, who are drawn to this ancient practice. Witness the 82-year-old man doing poses in the aisle on a flight to Tokyo, who was asked to return to his seat. He pushed his own wife, threatened murder, and head-butted and bit a Marine who tried to assist flight attendants in making him sit down. He'd recently taken up yoga. Maybe if he'd started in his 70s. We so identify with the relaxed, peaceful side of yoga that we forget what it's for. Yoga, one translation is union, is a transformative path for integrating body, mind, and spirit. Yes, relaxation is part of the equation, but over time, you'll also be brought into close contact with negative states if the yoga is working. Everything is bound to its shadow. For me, yoga has often been paired with anger, the most afflictive of my darker emotions. Yoga helped me deal with the after effects of a childhood with an angry father, as well as with my own anger. I think it's our family inheritance, likely passed down for generations, along with our dark hair, formerly dark hair, and blue eyes. As a yoga teacher, I've had the opportunity to observe my process and recognize many other angry yogis. I'm not talking about rage yoga, which promises to be zen as fuck, involves swearing, listening to Metallica, drinking, and doing downward dog in a bar. And it was invented by a Calgary contortionist. She's a contortionist and juggler during a painful breakup. I'm talking about classical yoga, which often induces meltdowns because it's a path that changes our unconscious patterns. There's a story that explains how this works. A man gallops by on a horse. "Where are you going?" yells a curious bystander. I don't know, he replies. Ask the horse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. This is from a piece called The Seraphim, and I have to give credit to Susan for the title because it was hers. She's a brilliant editor, as many of you know. So nights at camp were inky black, a faint smell of incense rising from glowing mosquito coils. Where the trees grew close, there was only a moving canopy of fur above us, but over the lake, the stars spread thick and deep. The cabins had no electricity, and the bug-repelling brown bulbs over the communal bathrooms spilt a paltry light. At the beginning of the 2-week session, the nights were terrifying, but by the final few, I would welcome them, finding in their cool breezes relief from the oppressive midday heat. One such night, late in the session, my counselor, Aqua, didn't return to cabin for tuck-in. This was my first or second year at camp, and I slept in an upper bunk, head-to-head, with a skinny girl named Stephanie. Aqua's absence scared us, and Stephanie refused to sleep without her there, and I was tall for my age and tall was close to brave, so I suggested to Stephanie that we look for her. We'll find her, I said. I'm sure it's nothing. Voices carried far, as did the sounds of flip-flops scrabbling over rock. Stephanie and I looked for Aqua in the beach shed, startled by stacks of CPR Annies in the half-light, the black lake licking the shore nearby. We looked for her in the craft room near the older girls section of the camp, and in the head counselor's messy cabin, recently abandoned, paper scattered. We called her name in hoarse half-whispers, ignoring the warnings from the other girls to return to bed. Aqua came back to the cabin long after we gave up, after we ourselves had fallen asleep. The next morning, Aqua said she was helping an older camper who had accidentally drunk a glass of bleach. I recall the crystal clear specificity of it, just one glass, and my confusion. How does someone drink bleach by accident? She was thirsty, Aqua said, and she wasn't paying attention. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Susan, for championing this book and the content of it. My piece is about doing an ayahuasca ceremony. Ayahuasca is something that people drink. It's been used for thousands of years in the Amazonian rainforest, and it's supposed to get you to cross through the veil and pass into the spirit world. So it's a ceremonial, medicinal practice, indigenous practice. I'm the daughter of an Anglican priest, and I did my first ayahuasca ceremony about 7 years ago, and I called my father afterwards and I said, I've had my first religious experience. So this is sort of well into the ceremony. And I brought my dog, and she was asleep in the middle of the room. Her name is Raffle. At this point, inspired by something mercifully unegoic, I crawled forward to pet Raffle where she lay in the shrunken center of the room. There was a sudden collective restless stirring among the group, as if we'd all just called ourselves back from such far-flung mental distances as we'd zoomed off to. Her beautiful fur, soft as rabbit, black and tan and white, the incredible wild markings on her face, and her ears like damp cardboard cones covered in velvet. I felt so much love for her. She is such a smart, intuitive dog, so intelligent in her gaze. I stroked her and suddenly understood that if I stayed with her, I would observe her death. The medicine would take me down that road. As with all things, she too must pass. That relentless teaching, that always, in the presence of love, you must have the willingness to let it go. We are so inclined to be possessive in love, so the medicine reminds us to feel our love and to feel our helplessness, not as pathetic, but as wisdom, as stoicism. That great acceptance. Ayahuasca is stoicism training, hard lessons for the heart. Feel your love, then feel the loss. Let your heart break. Then try to feel your love again. Trust that your heart is made for this work, that it is designed to break and repair itself. Then it is doing its job. That's what it's made for. To metabolize beauty and pain, to build up and break down, to digest, the way sunlight is digested by a leaf, to form energy through photosynthesis and release waste as carbon dioxide, to absorb and to release, to pulsate. This is the part that is not about you or what you get out of it, but rather the force of life at work through you. See if you can still love from this place. It's scary. Watch what you most love turn to dust in your hands, and rejoice that there was life at all to love, and that you did. You loved.
This is from an essay called A Real Woman. The words on my screen are shocking, mortifying, incongruous. They are my words, written 15 years and another self ago. A casual self-Googling has unearthed them in an essay called A Real Woman, published pre-internet in a magazine when I was 18 years old. Now, unbeknownst to me, the essay has gone viral. A real woman, I discover, as I click link after link, has been posted and reposted. It is on blogs, websites, discussion forums. It's being debated, defended, derided. One post has 340 comments. Another features a PDF download with colorful bubbles around each of my points. People are printing it, hanging it above desks, recommending it to friends. I am appalled. A real woman, say the words on my screen attached to my name, does not compete for equality with men or chafe at God's design for male and female, but delights in her calling to complement man's role. A real woman, argues the me I used to be, respects and submits to her father's authority, preparing herself to exercise the biblical role in her relationship with her future husband. A real woman, say I, portrays chastity, modesty, and reverence in her manner, and wears the ornament of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is her true beauty. How on earth, asks a friend who knows me only as the person I am now, did you get from being that Heidi Reimer to being this one? At age 13, my Bible for how to be a woman, aside from the actual Bible, was a book called The Way Home, Beyond Feminism, Back to Reality. The author was once not only a feminist, but a radical feminist. In my 13-year-old imagination, I saw a wild-haired woman dancing braless, screaming on a burning car in the street, until she relinquished her career and accepted her true place at home, submitting to her husband, trusting God to plan her family, homeschooling the unlimited children he had blessed her with. My own mother homeschooled her 6 children. Other families we knew had 10 or 12. Men were reversing vasectomies, women were leaving careers, girls, me, were filling hope chests with tablecloths and dinnerware to prepare for our callings as wives and mothers and keepers at home. The movement, known as Christian patriarchy, or quiverful, was inspired by a psalm that compares children to arrows in a warrior's quiver. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them, and by several verses in the Apostle Paul's letter to Titus, instructing that older women should teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. The very word of God depended on women's obedience and homekeeping, and I did not see how a woman could be aligned with God's will if she embraced any other path.
Okay, these are fabulous. 3 more. I would be one of them. Good grief. Did I put my name in here? This is very scary. Sandy and Julia. Okay, apparently Susan Scott is the editor of 2 anthologies that upend conventional thinking about spirituality and religion. The author of Temple in a Teapot, which she launched on a 1,000-mile road trip through the American West, is also the nonfiction editor at the New Quarterly, and currently directs right on the French River Creative Writing Retreat. And the people who run that retreat are also here. They're fabulous. You need to come and have wine with them afterwards. Alex, put up your hand. Nicola, put up your hand. Beautiful. My next book is Sainted Dirt, Reckonings with Land, Language, Family, and Imperfect Teaware. Sandy Wabagajig is an Odawa woman from Wikmawigong in unceded territory, Manitoulin Island. She moved to the US in the late 60s and returned to Canada in the mid-80s. Her personal life includes a marriage to Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers Band, a union that produced a daughter, Jessica. Sandy, or Sandy Blue Sky, as she's known, is writing a memoir about the upheavals she witnessed and survived in the 60s and 70s. Julia Zarankin is a writer and aspiring bird-splainer with a particular fondness for sewage lagoons. Her words have appeared in the New Quarterly, Orion, Maisonneuve, The Walrus, and other fine places. When she isn't writing, she's lecturing to lifelong learners and leading culture tours with Worldwide Quest. Welcome. Okay, I'm the S, and this will be super, super short, but this is a bit like Heidi's piece, where I like to, I put this piece in here because people mistake me for somebody who's eminently sensible. And the satisfying part of a good long life is you start one place and you end up a completely different place. So tiny, 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 tiny sliver. News of the vision came on the eve of my high school graduation. All along there had been visions. It was enthralling, the boy's likeness to young Joseph Smith. But this vision was different. The prophet Elijah had appeared and told the boy that he and I should marry. We were meant to be, is what was said. We related best, the boy and I, through long handwritten letters which I burned so my mother wouldn't find them. But this one I jammed beneath the pillow. Thus saith Elijah. So this was a proposal? The message read like a script for a Book of Mormon pageant. I dared not question the pronouncement. Questioning would show a lack of faith. But if this were meant to be, why did I feel numb? What I felt was numb. This was not the fairy tale ending I'd envisioned. I mean, running off together, I could picture. Hitchhiking for Jesus, I could picture. What I could not picture was being someone's wife. You'll have to read the story to know what happened.
The inspiration to the story began by thinking of Paul Simon's Hello Darkness, My Old Friend, The Sound of Silence. It reminded me of how many of us have suffered through the dark days in our lives and the deep silence that surrounds it. But it is also a time for inner reflections, solitude, and spiritual growth. And this is 2 minutes. Absolutely 2 minutes. She said, make it 2 minutes, okay. So I started at the beginning. The darkness was becoming too much of a friend. I could not bear the silence of aloneness anymore. It was like being at sea, lost and drifting. From where I sat in Macon, Georgia, the island in the distance was Atlanta. And that's where I went, straight for Margaritaville. Believe me, there's one in every town. And suddenly, my world got a whole lot brighter. That was the 70s after all, and I was in my 20s. Single life was less lonely, thanks to barflies, nightly drink specials, and some of that good old Southern music. In time, though, the artificial environment took its toll. I began to suffer flashbacks, emotional extremes, the happiest I'd ever been and the saddest, haunting reminders of the turmoil I thought I'd left behind, left me in pieces. In survival mode, you start rebuilding your life the best you can. Maybe the hurt or pain will go away, you think. If you just move away, if you start over somewhere else. That seemed to be the way to go. But in the back of my mind and in my soul, I knew something wasn't right. I missed the red dirt soil of the country. I missed red roosters crowing. I began to feel empty. The fire was going out. I was feeling sick. Finally, I realized what I really needed was a different kind of light. With only a few possessions, I headed north to the Great Smoky Mountains, where the moon and stars lit up the night sky, the rivers and streams so refreshing, such a relief from the noisy city streets. The cool mountain air now filled my lungs, instead of the stale air of smoke-filled bars.
Thank you so much, Susan, for this wonderful opportunity. The essay I'm going to read from tonight is called Saved by a Red-Winged Blackbird. And for those of you who can see, this is a little graphic of a red-winged blackbird. A little obsessed. We stopped near a bush and someone called out, "Red-winged blackbird!" I almost didn't look because the thought of lifting my binoculars to my eyes brought with it a slight wave of nausea. But the bird stood still, balancing on a cattail, and I managed the trifecta of raising the binoculars, focusing them, and finding the desired object magnified in my field of vision. "What is that?" I gasped, blinded by the unexpected vermilion patches on the blackbird's epaulets. The sound it made didn't match the majestic chromatic statement of the glistening black, contrasting with the burning red on the bird's lesser coverts. A protracted screechy gurgle, which Sibley's field guide describes as conqueree, sounded primal. A reminder that something of the prehistoric exists within. Descendants of dinosaurs, birds make sounds that force us to venture into pre-human territory, the world before our own, of which we have only bones as a record. A world of which paleontology speaks with certainty, but which for us, pedestrian non-scientists, retains a note of magic. The call of the red-winged blackbird, a trace of the ancient, a shade of creatures that had once been. Connoisseurs call it a spark bird, the sighting that changes everything, the glimpse of color that alters one's perception of the world, that demarcates past from present, distinguishes before from after. The best thing about looking closely at that red-winged blackbird as he posed and unabashedly belted out his screeching song is that he didn't even register my presence. He had other business to attend to, namely securing a mate who was partial to his cacophonic song. What a miraculously liberating epiphany, that I could be a part of something beyond the world of my study or my apartment, or my anxieties about whether I would or wouldn't one day fight with my husband, of course we would, and whether said potential argument would dismantle the shaky edifice of a life I had been working so hard to construct. The bird returned to me a sense of perspective and allowed me to simply be. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a perfect note to end on. So may this beautiful book in your hands be the spark bird in your quest to delve deeper into this. I would encourage you to come up and talk to the writers, invite them to your classes, invite them to your homes, do something interesting with them. We are, yeah, really, by all means. I should say, I am on a mission. I just think there's a lot of really beautiful work that we need to do. And this is also, at another level, deeply social justice work. If we want to be a welcoming country, and we want all kinds of people to live here and to feel safe and to thrive, then we need to educate ourselves about the stories, the myths, the power, and the traditions that people carry. And we are a secular society, but we've allowed some of that knowledge to grow very thin. And stories like this allow us to re-inhabit that territory, that enchanted territory, and learn something that we may have forgotten that our ancestors held in a very interesting place. So it's deep social justice work, it's literary work, it's women writing, and it's a kick-ass book. I invite you to come on up and mingle and enjoy the libations. And oh, I see there's a donation pot too. Oh my gosh. Should you be so moved, that would help us pay for the venue and just kind of take care of business. But anyway, just your presence here is the most important thing. Oh, and buy the books, like obviously, so obvious. Thank you to Queen Books, who is here tonight. They're just, where did she go? Is she still here? Oh, there you are. Amazing. Okay, so Jackie's going to take care of you. She's here with Queen Books, and any of your independent bookstores, if you want to ask for copies of the book, just call your independent bookstores and ask them to bring it in or bring it into the library. Anyway, get up, mingle, have fun.
It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Can I give you a congratulations? Also fantastic.